Meeting will come to order. Welcome to NID Special Board Meeting. The purpose of a workshop for the Raw Water Master Plan report to the Department of Water Resources. This is
Ag water.
No, ag
Did
water.
I say ag?
Ag water.
Did I say ag water?
Yes, no, you said raw water master.
Raw water. See, I'm gonna explain that, and I already messed it up, right? Okay, the ag water master plan. This is not the raw water master plan workshop.
Right.
Those will be later in the season.
Alphabet soup.
So we'll start with that one. This is a workshop, board workshop. There'll be no action taken tonight. This is to receive and discuss, or to review and discuss the plan as it's been developed by the staff and by the consultant. This is also not will not be appropriate time to talk about water rates. That's all going to be coming up in the next 3 months. We'll be talking water rates specifically. This is to talk about how much water we've used, where we're going, and then it will be fodder for the raw water master plan that we plan, or the plan for water that we plan to develop in the next year or so. With that, I'll turn it over to a staff report for Mr. Ludwig.
Yeah, thank you, Director Beerwagen. Good evening, board and members of the public. This is the second of 2 workshops that we're going to hold to present the public draft Ag Water Management Plan. As you're aware, this is a plan that we have to submit every 5 years. We have to update the plan and submit it to the state every 5 years. This workshop is intended to present the public draft Ag Water Management Plan and to receive input again from both the board as well as the public, similar to what we did last time. Shortly, we'll have a presentation from Jim Crowley. Tonight's presentation will include some discussion about the changes and updates we made on the plan since we had the last workshop last week. I did want to point out that the written comments that were received by March 16th, like we've talked about, were included in the draft document submitted as part of the board packet. So in the packet that you got for the public hearing, those comments that we received, is in that document. I think there's roughly 25 folks that have commented on the plan for next week, and that's for the public hearing for next week, correct? And that's currently available on the website, so if people want to go and see comments that have been provided to date, they can do that as part of.
Doug, could you be more, could you explain a little further about what next week will be in relationship to the comments that we received, so people out there listening can understand what we're doing?
Yeah, so the next week is the public hearing, where we'll actually take the comments that we've received up until this date, and then from this date on until the actual, including tonight and up until the public hearing next week. All those comments we'll present to the board as part of the public hearing process. We'll identify the comments and talk with response to those comments. Some of those comments aren't necessarily regulatory in nature requirements as far as the document itself, and so we don't necessarily anticipate discussing those. But all of the comments, regardless of what's in the comment, will be included in the packet because they were submitted as part of the Ag Water Management Plan.
Okay. And is it your understanding, or is it for the public to understand, that the comments received will then impact the final draft of the Ag Water Management Plan?
Correct. So those comments that we receive, we'll discuss those with the board, and staff will say this comment was received suggesting this or stating this. We'll say, yes, that's a good comment. We want to incorporate that into our final document.
I see. Okay.
Or we can say, while it's a good comment, we don't necessarily think it makes a difference in terms of what needs to be updated in the plan that gets submitted to the state. So we'll kind of go through that process.
You'll see even tonight's document has been updated from the comments that were made last week at the workshop, the first workshop. So it's an iterative process.
Right. And that was a moving target.
Yes. And understand that we expect public comment during the public hearing, right? So
yes, right.
So depending on the results of those comments, whether we can make small adjustments or if we need to go back and do some additional research or investigation and come back to the board to have a further discussion on those comments that we receive at the hearing, we can do that. But if they're relatively straightforward in nature and we can answer them, we'll try to answer them right there on the spot during the hearing. and if not, then we'll regroup and come back. All of those will be incorporated in the document.
Okay, I got lots of questions here.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Director Peters.
Yes, last week on table 213, I had made a comment that, the declining, on the rate structure, the declining rate or the uniform rate, it notes on the document that it was based on volume delivered. And I thought we had discussed it last week because table 212 notes that the volume delivered is based on the volume ordered. And table 213 says it's based on the volume delivered.
Director Peters, can we maybe get into the presentation, because our consultant can go through, and then we can definitely have that as a topic going forward, but maybe we can get into the presentation and staff
The change
and the
that you said you
consultant.
made, and you made all the easy changes, and that
I
seems like an easy change.
appreciate that. I mean, how about we get into the document and the changes that we made, and then we'll have an opportunity to look at things that maybe were mentioned last week that may or may not have been
So
inserted
you
into
address
the
this in this presentation?
I don't know at this point, but let's get into it.
Can I just ask a process question? I'm wondering if it would help us, I think, as board members and the public to have a document that has track changes
Yes.
so that we can see, and I can understand you know, if you give us a PDF with track changes and comments where you say, we don't believe we should make this change, or we've clarified it, or we've edited, because I, honestly, this is, you know, I could see some changes, but I'm sure I didn't see all of them. So just from a process point of view, I wondered if we could do that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a good comment. I think the idea was that they highlighted the changes that were made in the document, but not necessarily showing the strikeout or the adjustments that were made, right? So the highlights in there were saying these were things that were adjusted or changed since that last one that you've seen. But we can do that in the future, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
That was great.
And my question is also a process question, follows on hers. Did I hear you say that if we got to the public hearing and there was enough discussion by the board to warrant putting that off that vote that day? Is that correct?
Correct. That would be at the discretion of the
Okay.
board, right?
So
Whether
that's not
you
a
think we want to do
drop dead date either, as far as adding comments or changing.
So the date of April 1st is within the statute that's required, it's supposed to be adopted by April 1st.
Okay.
The board, at its discretion, if it feels that we need to spend additional time on the document before it's submitted, that's something maybe Andy can chime in on in terms of the potential risk for doing that.
Okay. Very good. So go ahead with your,
Okay.
staff report.
You know, I think at this point, we'll go ahead and hand it over to Jim and let him go through the presentation, and then we'll go from there. Okay, Jim?
Okay, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
And you can see my screen?
It's not full screen, Jim.
Okay. Let me work on this. Is that any better?
Still not full screen.
You know, Jim, we can pop it up on this side. You'll just have to let Chris know when you want to change the slide.
Okay. So are you guys seeing the kind of the presentation outline?
Yeah.
Okay.
See the title page?
We're seeing a title page, not an outline.
Well, you're seeing the different, I think he's talking about
It is up here.
showing all the different slides as an outline.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna try one more thing.
Hey, Jim,
Yeah,
we just updated it. It's on
Oh,
Okay.
there we go.
here. If you can just maybe tell Chris when you want to advance to the next slide.
Okay, sorry about that. Good evening, the board and members of the public. This is the 2020 Agricultural Water Management Plan Overview Workshop. Next slide, Chris, please. This presentation is well, we've already done the introductions. We're going to talk about the difference between the agricultural water management plan and the urban water management plan. We're going to talk about the requirements of the agricultural water management plan. We're going to give an overview of the NID plan. Talk about the comment submission. Doug's already answered some questions on that, and then open it up for questions. Next slide, please, Chris. So both these, the ag and the urban water management plans are required through the water code statutes to be updated every 5 years and submitted to the Department of Water Resources, DWR. The plans do have some similarities and some differences. Similarities is that each plan has prescriptive requirements in the statutes. DWR provides guidance on developing the plans through their guidebooks, and then they're both updated on a 5-year cycle. The difference, the obvious one is the agricultural is focused on ag and the urban is focused on treated water. But the really big difference between the two is the urban water management plan projects demands and supplies and is a lot more inclusive of planning elements than the agricultural plan is. So we have here in the other two boxes kind of the main elements of the urban water management plan and the ag water management plan. You kind of see on the urban water management plan, there's more prescriptive requirements that need to be addressed. And we'll be talking about the urban water management plan in the coming weeks or months, but they have new and more detailed requirements with respect to drought planning. So we'll be getting into those on down the road. The agricultural water management plan is asks for your agricultural deliveries for the past 5 years, asks for a water budget of those deliveries, and they have statute defined specific elements that need to go into that water budget. And then as you can see here, there's other things. There's less of a supply reliability and drought planning prescriptive element to be consistent across all of NID's customers. We have created the drought planning water shortage contingency plan beyond the requirements of the ag plan, so it'll meet the requirements of the urban plan. So you'll just have one drought plan to be consistent. Okay, next slide, please, Chris. Each of these plans are due to the state on their own schedule, but pretty close to each other. The boxes on the top of the timeline are the ag plan. The boxes on the bottom are the urban plan. You can see here that we are in March. We're doing the workshops, and then we're going to have the public hearing for the plan on the 24th. It is written in the statutes that the plan must be adopted by the board by April 1st and then submitted to the state within 30 days. The state still has not created, I haven't checked in the past 8 hours, but have not created the submittal tables that we need to submit along with the ag plan. So we'll kind of see what happens there, if the state's going to have them ready for submittal within 30 days or not. And then the urban water management plan on the bottom there, we are intending to have workshops similar to the ag water management plan. And then we haven't scheduled yet the public hearing, but it can be in late May or early June. and then with the board adopting it sometime in June. And then that has to be submitted to DWR by July 1st. Okay, next slide, Chris, please. So an overview of the main elements that are listed in the statutes for an ag water management plan. You need to talk about how it was prepared and adopted. You need to describe the service area, list the water uses for the last 5 years, the supplies that were available and provided over the last 5 years. You need to create a water budget for that ag water use. You need to discuss climate change and how it could affect the ag water use. Explain your ag water efficiency program per the measures that are listed in the statute, and then provide supporting documentation for the plan. Next slide, please. So the plan preparation portion, we notified all the cities and the counties in the service areas, other entities, and then we also made general news releases through the NID outreach process. We have had the workshop last week and received some comments. We have here a few of the modifications that were made. We modified the description of the latent demand. That's the people that are on private groundwater wells. We modified how that was described. We clarified which of the management objectives are ongoing and would be dependent on continued funding. And then we provide continuity on the statute-defined efficient water management practices numbering. In the previous draft, we had left out some of the practices that weren't being implemented, which I think caused confusion on the numbering of them. And then there were other edits and clarifications, as was mentioned earlier. They were highlighted in the draft that's out now. Next, or the 24th, will be the public hearing, and then the board will adopt when it is acceptable to them, and then submit it to DWR. Next slide, please.
Jim, this is Director Heck. I have a quick question, and maybe you will get to this at the end of your presentation, but for the folks who are listening and attending, when you, can you go back one slide, Chris? Oh, sure. When you talk about those modifications that you made, it would be great to enumerate what those are for the public who are listening. Is that part of this presentation? Or where would the public find those changes?
Where would I find them?
And where would we find them? Yes, where would we find them? But also, where would the public find them? The modified description of latent demand. I mean, the demand is a huge piece of this. And so where would that be found? And are you going to elaborate on that in your presentation so I can just be quiet and wait? Or, you know, how are we going to put that out there for folks?
So this, I was not intending to go over every change that was made in the presentation. The updated ag plan that went into the public hearing packet and is, I'm pretty sure, available on the webpage. As we discussed earlier, it has the changes highlighted to show where we've made changes.
I mean, I'm wondering if, for the purposes of this presentation, because not everybody will be able to sift through 50 or 75 pages. If you could point to us specifically about the demand changes you made, where that is, and maybe just take a minute to describe it, because I think that's kind of a keystone or cornerstone of this plan, is to get into the demand numbers. That, am I in line, Mr. Principal?
Well, having not done this before, I'm not sure. I'm feeling like it'll all be fine to wait till the public hearing.
That's fine.
Yeah, because then should all be up to speed, including any more changes that can be after this time. So
That's fine.
that would be my preference.
So, but it would be good if we specifically highlighted that. So it's fine to wait. I'm cool with that.
I think it's would be appropriate to do that.
Okay, thank you,
So
Mr. President.
maybe for clarification purposes, I think the version you all have tonight has the highlight in it.
Right.
I'm sure, yeah, it is, but I was thinking about the folks from the public that are there and having to go through, 70 pages of stuff looking for it.
Okay.
It would be nice to.
I know I wasn't sure if you guys have that.
Oh, yeah, no, we do, or at least I do, but
And
it's just to laser focus it.
And this is online too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This packet, okay, all right.
Well, and I don't mean to be nitpicky, but I saw some of the tables have changed, but they're not highlighted.
Right.
So I'm not, this is a big document, it was a lot of work, so I'm not being critical, I'm just saying that we just try to, I think if we work from a track changes version, it just
Yeah.
make it a lot easier for us. We could see the original language and then we can see the modifications.
Okay, so are we ready to move on?
Ready to go ahead, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Director Heck, without getting into the details, the question about the latent demand was what happens when these parcels on private groundwater, if their wells fail?
Right.
And so the description was softened, I believe it's in chapter 6, to say that some of them may become NID customers, where previously it said they would become NID customers.
Oh, that was it?
Yeah, that was the soft service discussion we had when you had mentioned
Well, yeah, I remember we talked
25,000
about it.
parcels and how many
but,
could really be served.
I'm really,
Yeah.
the purpose for tonight, why we're all here, is for the folks who are attending. So
First time.
if there was a big change, we needed to let them know, so they didn't have to pick through this whole document to find if there was one word.
So, well, it's highlighted, page 49 on, section 6.2, to
Okay,
be
thank you.
specific.
Did everybody hear that?
There's a highlighted section, 3 paragraphs down. It's not in track changes, but, it's highlighted, so, but in the future,
That's helpful.
I get you. In the future, the track changes would be helpful
Thank you.
to see.
Okay. All right, next slide, please, Chris. Okay, so it provides a description of the service area. 287,000 acres approximately 3,200 acres are agricultural, and that is from the customer self-reported reports. 280,000 acre feet of storage, approximately 500 miles, give or take, of conveyance infrastructure. The ag deliveries are mostly measured through the orifice box based on a miner's inch. The rates that customers are charged are volumetric. And then it also includes the drought plan here, which I mentioned earlier is above and beyond what the requirements are in the ag statutes, so that it's consistent with what will be required for the urban plan. And I'll get into some details on that on the next slide, please, Chris. So the drought plan includes a description of the vulnerability and resiliency planning that NID undertakes. It describes an annual water supply and demand assessment procedure that'll be new on the urban side and will have to be done annually and submitted to the state starting in 2024. So it explains the steps that NID will take to determine its supply availability in the coming years. And then based on that, or in the coming year, and then based on that assessment, it lists 6 water shortage stages and responses to those water shortages. The 6 is in line with the statute requirements for the Urban Water Management Plan. The state is attempting to get everybody on the same 6 shortage stages, so reporting can be more consistent. Each of the stage lists the forecast supply trigger that would put us into that stage. It lists measures that both treated and ag water customers will be asked to do to reduce their demands. It lists what the district will do during that stage and the enforcement measures for the stage. And then the other main element of the drought plan is it discusses the financial impacts of going into a drought stage, mainly the reduced revenue that is likely to occur and the increased costs on outreach and enforcement measures. Next slide, please. So here we have a summary of various tables in the document. The document has, when you submit this report to the state, they have individual tables for many of these individual water uses. So that's how we report them in the document to be consistent with the submittal process. But here they're all listed in one table. The water uses 2016 through 2020. The agricultural, again, that's what the customers ordered. And that's what NID assumes is the use. So we have the other elements, the environmental, the in-stream flow requirements, recreational water usage, the municipal, that's both to NID treated water customers and to the other entities that NID serves, such as Grass Valley and Nevada City. The canal water loss is estimated at 15% of the total amount that's diverted into the canals to come up with these total uses. Next slide, please. And so here we have a summary again of individual tables from the report of these supplies, 2016 through 2020. We have the PG&E contract purchase that you see was only made in 2016. We can purchase up to 54,361 acre feet based on various conditions. But after, it was only purchased in 2016 and it wasn't purchased for the other years. The watershed runoff is the amount of flow that was measured through the various gauging stations and streams throughout the watershed. NID's overall water rights are approximately 450,000 acre feet. And so that's what's listed there in the restriction. The carryover storage 280,000 acre feet is about the available storage in the reservoirs. And then as Chip talks about in his annual water supply report, the district strategy looks at how much water to carry over to make sure there's enough for the following irrigation year. The district does not use groundwater, and then the recycled water is diverted out of the streams after the wastewater treatment plants have discharged it into the stream, and then NID picks it up with their other water supply and diverts it into their canals. There was a question about why these rows aren't totaled. And the reasoning is because the watershed runoff, that's an annual number, and NID's water rights are time dependent. Some of them allow diversion during certain months and others don't, so that the available supply is not the total of these numbers. And especially, for like 2017, where the runoff was 541,000 acre feet, that was already 90,000 acre feet higher than NID's water rights. So that's why the total is not shown here. Okay, next slide, please. So we talked about the water budget. These are the elements that are required to be in the water budget. The top part of the table is basically the input onto the field, and then the bottom part is the outflow of the system. So effective precipitation was estimated as described in the report. Effective precipitation is the available precipitation that is available for crops to actually use. Surface water deliveries, that's the flow that's diverted into the canals. And then there's no groundwater deliveries. So the outflow, the evapotranspiration, that's also estimated based on a formula that was selected out of the options that we had. That's basically the amount of water that a crop needs to grow and produce. The surface outflow is the measured spill at the end of the canals. So that's a measured number. The canal loss to deep percolation, that's estimated at 15% of the diverted flow. Municipal raw deliveries, those are the deliveries to the wholesale customers, Nevada City, Grass Valley, and those that get annual water year round. And then the treated water system deliveries are the raw water that's diverted into NID's water treatment plants. So we have this for 2016 through 2020, and when you compare the inflows to the outflows, they obviously don't match. And I think that's one of the key takeaways here is a lot of these factors and elements for the water budget we currently have to estimate because we don't have the measured data for it. So when you go down the components, looking at all the components that have the word estimated after it, we're estimating a lot of what goes into this water budget. And so these differences between the inflow and the outflow and the amount of estimation that has to happen, those fed into identifying and creating the proposed water management objectives. Next slide, Chris, please. So these are the proposed water management objectives that are, geared towards better understanding ag water use and state as it goes through our system. So we're proposing to enhance the customer information of what crops they have, how many acres they're actually irrigating on. Right now, it's done in a self-reported crop report. So there's opportunities there to refine that understanding. Enhance measurement accuracy where feasible. We are on orifice box with miner's inch for most of the customers. So there's opportunities there to better understand how much water customers are actually diverting at the farm gate. We're going to continue long-range planning for supplies and demands. Enhance the understanding of the latent demands through the service area. There are a large number of parcels that are on private groundwater wells, and they may or may not become NID customers in the future, but it would help the long-range planning to better understand the magnitude of that potential. Continue watershed the management efforts to enhance runoff volume and quality. Continue the water efficiency program. Water efficiency is a balanced side opportunity to offset supply needs. And then the last one here is because the counties are the regulatory body for private wells, the recommendation is to also work with the counties to better understand the extent, the number of wells, where they're clustered, where there's good areas and where there's bad areas. And knowing that information helps NID plan for where they may need to update or modify their distribution system for treated and raw water. Next slide, please. So then we also talk about climate change impacts to agricultural water use. So previously, last summer and fall, NID went through a climate change modeling process where the consultant projected the impacts to supply availability using different climate data sets projecting out into the future. And so the findings from that and the impacts to the supply were referenced in the ag plan. In general, the modeling results mirror and reflect what most other people are seeing in their climate change modeling. They're talking about increased runoff during the winter, so more rain, less snow. For NID, which is 100% snowmelt based, that could affect how much water they can actually capture and store for the irrigation season. Another element is what's going to happen to agriculture as climate changes, and we may have warmer periods. We may more prolonged droughts. Higher elevation may be open to agricultural use due to the warming trends. The other impact is on the watershed and what that does to the balance in the watershed with, we can have bark beetles come in during a drought and kill trees, and that sets you up for the catastrophic fires, which in the end severely impact water quality and runoff. Another climate change impact is that as we saw in 2015, the other parts of the state need water just as much as we do, and in 2015, the state reduced the amount that we could take from our supplies to make it available for others. So that's a regulatory impact to our system. And then the other one that we've talked about before here is what happens to the private groundwater users during a drought if their wells go dry. So those are the summary of the climate change impacts. Next slide, please. Okay, the plan talks about the agricultural water use efficiency program. There are 2 mandated measures in the statutes that have to be implemented, and that's water measurement and volumetric pricing. And then there are 14 other conditional measures. NID is and will continue to implement 11 of those conditional measures. But they will not implement the district paying for on-farm irrigation improvements, as that's not cost effective. So that's the efficiency program. Next slide, please. Supporting documentation. Okay, so the plan requires various statements about water measurement and collection descriptions. It has references, and then our appendices include many of the requirements plus additional things that aren't required, such as the public outreach comments. It will also include the adoption resolution when it is adopted. It includes our rules and regulations and policies. And then it includes a checklist that DWR has provided so that they can easily evaluate these plans when they come in. So that is the overview of the ag water management. I believe the next slide, Chris, is just ready for discussion.
Thank you, Jim. Did you have something more to say, Doug?
I don't think so at this time. The idea with this was obviously it's a very similar presentation than you had before, but partly that was because of the concern of folks not being able to make the daytime meeting. We want to make sure they had very similar.
Okay. And with that in mind, does the board have any more questions? Laura, I think you had one.
I do, thank you. I had a question on page 11 of the slide, that was the agricultural water budget. I noticed that since March 10th and today, the surface water deliveries and the municipal deliveries numbers, both of them changed. The surface water deliveries, I don't know if it's by the same amount, I didn't do the math, but did the surface water deliveries decrease and the municipal increase, or what happened there in the last week with those two numbers?
So a couple things. One of them, I believe, was a typo, especially in the year 2020, and that has since been corrected. That's
Yeah.
Right, that was a deep percolation.
The other one is that staff dug back into these documents and was trying to turn over every stone we could, and we realized that we didn't account for our annual raw water customers in this document anywhere. And although they're not really ag water purchasers, they are using the water. They're part of that total that we have diverted. And so we needed to include them in there somewhere. So they have now been included in the M&I as part of the water users in the homes. So you'll see that, and it's roughly about 3,300 acre feet a year. And when we get into the document, you'll see the table where that's reflected, and it is highlighted as one of the changes we made.
I see, and the municipal deliveries dropped, or increased from 2,800, is it the municipal?
That's where it went. Yeah, that's where we stuck it, because it's not, again, it's not really an ag delivery. It's hard to figure out where to put it, but
Right.
we figured that was the most appropriate.
Okay, and so the surface water, that's just a difference, I didn't do the math, but
Yes,
you did it as
it's the addition of that, yeah, roughly 3,000 acre feet.
okay. And then on the
Back to your first comment on the table 213, I think it was. And you're right, we did talk about that it shouldn't necessarily be called delivered, but maybe purchased
Yes.
in that table,
Mm-hmm.
right? Isn't that, I had that circled, so that's probably something we'll have to revisit and adjust.
Okay,
Yeah,
I thought we
That-
were.
Excuse me. On that comment particularly, I was waiting for DWR to release their tables, because they have very specific language in their tables about, well, they provide the language for the tables. So when those come out, you'll have to use whatever their table says.
Could we always footnote it, Jim, and below the table and with a better descriptor of what we actually do there?
Yep.
Okay.
That would be great.
That would be good.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other board questions, comments at this point?
I do.
Director Heck?
Thank you very much. So back when we talked about the private groundwater users may need to become NID customers, and I'm understanding that's really the folks on private wells.
When their wells are dry.
Yeah, I'm wondering, first of all, if we could say what that is instead of private groundwater users. I mean, that's sort of a very bureaucratic term. And then my follow-up to that is, do we know, or does anyone know, or can someone quantify how many people that is? How many private wells there are here?
No, I think that's part of the discussion that Jim had, right, that we need to have some better coordination and discussions with the counties, who are the ones that have that
I'll bet the
information
county
available to
doesn't
them.
really know, because I'll tell you what, when I drilled my well, I mean, for example, we drilled it in the early 80s. They didn't even have well permits. We literally got a guy, and he came and drilled it as a trade for something else.
Yeah.
And they weren't even giving permits then.
Right.
I will say, we do coordinate with the county code department, and they do send us a list of all the wells that
They know
that
about
are permitted. And we do that so that we can check and make sure we have backflow protection on our own system. And but that's really what we've used that list for. I think what we're describing in this plan is this is kind of an opportunity to cross-reference those, see, okay, these are areas within NID's distribution system that are mainly wells, something to keep an eye on, something to coordinate with the county, and they can communicate to us, hey, this particular zone is experiencing problems, water quality issues, and the district can then say, okay, as part of our planning horizon, maybe this is an area that's gonna need some attention.
Well, I think quantifying it is important, because if we, there's like, how many, 50,000 wells, 20,000 wells, I don't know what the number is.
Yeah, I think the well drillers is also a good, resource in terms of wells that are bad or marginal at best,
They
right?
know everything.
Because they're out there making adjustments, adding to the depths, et cetera, right? So
Right, they
that would
know
also be another good resource to be able to, maybe not necessarily get the number, but at least to highlight the areas that we know,
Our
you know,
problem areas.
this section has historically
Well,
all
if
the
you're a real
wells are.
estate person, you know where the problem areas are.
Yeah.
But,
Yes.
yeah, so, but what I'd love for us to have is that data, so we know where are the problem areas, how many wells are there, because I think we can expect that those folks will be coming to us for water at some point. And so, in part of our larger planning, I think we need to look at, you know, that issue.
Well, and as Jim brought up, I think it's an area of opportunity for the future. We haven't analyzed it in that method
Mhm.
to date, but I think certainly moving forward, we should do that. And I should clarify that we have had negotiations or communications with Nevada County, but Placer County not so much, so we need to improve on that as well.
So, Director Johansson, then Director
Thank you.
Peters.
Thanks, guys.
And I think a lot of those customers have, or those people who have drying wells have come to the district already. And there's noted places where this is happening down towards Alta Sierra.
Yeah.
Beyond that, and also from here to Wildwood on that ridge.
So the Iron Horse DFWLE
Yeah,
was solely moved forward because all of those folks had it failing wells.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Off
Yeah.
Sierra, they have a problem with,
Right.
Which
well.
is kind of the intent of that whole program, right, was to do that.
So it's significant, and so also the description of latent demand.
Mhm.
Whereas those wells might be one source, where the biggest demand for our water is gonna come from environmental concerns, and that's not mentioned.
It
Can you
is,
say more about that? This is always a confusing
right,
term.
it is in the text, not in the table, so it-
Yeah.
I mean, it is a demand. It's not a demand by our customers, but it is the demand on us.
Yeah, and I believe it's reflected in the document, it's just reflected in a different section.
right.
Well, it's reflected
and
on,
I think that
yeah.
the discrepancy that we may be discussing here is that in this particular document, it looks at the last 5 years of environmental flows.
sure,
I think what you may be referencing is the potential for additional flows once the first license comes into play. And you're right, but that will be discussed, I think, more in detail in the urban and the plan for water process. But this one's really focusing on, okay, here's how much environmental water we put out in the last 5 years.
so I would like, there's one change on page 30. It's on the environmental water use, the last sentence. Future environmental flows due to pending federal and state regulatory requirements will be different. Different doesn't quite cut it for me. Challenging might be a good word.
May increase?
I can think of other things. Onerous. You know,
Well, and based on the reference there, I'm assuming that came from the TM document. Is that correct, Jim?
Yes.
okay.
We can
So,
look at
But
But,
maybe there's a look at accentuating that somewhat.
I think we need to, because that is one of our biggest challenges.
Different part of measure.
Yeah. And then, last meeting, page 25, under on the bottom, under California Water Code, in critical water supply situations, there's a priority, and it's human, livestock, perennial crops, annual crops. But I remember saying recreation is included somehow, or is that part of the district policy? Recreation was mentioned.
Yes, I believe it's falling under number 3. Is that correct, Tor? In our calculations for our drought contingency plan, the 78,000 acre feet that we calculate every year includes
Included in that number.
human, livestock, and perennial crops, annual crops.
And what's the perennial crop on recreation?
It would include, I believe, the golf course.
Right. I remember you saying.
Yeah,
the
golf
Yeah,
course-
and-
The golf courses.
Golf courses and parks.
Public use area.
And that's a perennial crop.
Yeah, well, yeah. And if
No,
you're,
it's a recreational use.
Well, no, and then I'm asking, is pasture a perennial crop?
is not one that is included in that calculation.
So you see that,
I do.
thank you.
Yes, and I appreciate you bringing it up. I will say that during the last drought, that was the state took as well.
That's right.
They protected parks and golf courses, above others, which
Yep.
was
A little pasture, 77, pasture was clear out.
And I think on number four, my other one is, on climate change impacts. The question was, what will happen to agriculture? I think the stronger statement would be, what is gonna happen to our food security? Because it's really about food security.
Combine it, agriculture and food security.
No, I think they go hand in hand, I agree. Yeah.
So maybe addition with agriculture and food security.
It's the next step. People think, oh, ag, okay, but I can still go to the grocery store and get my food.
Yeah.
No, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
You're gonna find a local farmer, hopefully.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to have that clarification.
And that's on the 4th paragraph on climate change, page 49, is that where you're speaking?
Put it anywhere. I don't know.
Well, he was
Paragraph, but just have it in there.
Just get it in there.
Because food security is a big topic right now in this community, every community, and we're all looking for local sources of food, and the Sierra Harvest has 20% of wholesome food by 2025. They're not gonna get there if we don't have the water.
I think the pandemic helped highlight just how fragile our
Right.
supply sources can be.
Climate change
It is so one way or the other way, where local is, sales are up, but the larger guys are not planting certain things, because you go to a certain store and $1.49 or $1.47 a pound for asparagus. Olive oil is being dumped on the market because there's no food service. So there's a lot of structural changes, but local is one of the winners.
Yeah.
So Chip, following up
And
on, I'm sorry.
one
Great.
more is
Sorry.
climate change was the regulatory takings, but I'm not sure where you can put in that, where they can put that in there, but,
I'm sure it's regulatory what?
regulatory takings of our water,
Lead to it.
yeah.
Climate change is not a regulatory taking in and of itself. Climate change is a scientific fact. And then, as a result of climate change, there may also be regulatory taking.
Yeah, again, it's the next step.
Jim mentioned that in slide, that was discussed a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's in there, I just want to, underline bold.
Sure.
My question, I'll follow up on the wells thing. Do you have a feeling, did I ask this last meeting, do we have a feeling for an annual, application for failed wells, an application for water based on failed wells?
That's a great question. It's not something we ask.
They just come and ask for water?
No, it's not part of the application
Okay.
process, not a question that we immediately dive into. It may be something we can look forward to adding in the future.
It follows on this conversation. I get my gut feeling it's not a very big deal every year, but, a drought situation, it can be exacerbated.
Yeah.
It'd be good to know. I mean, it's just that checkbox.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges with failing wells that we see is that more often than not, they're not very close to our existing infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so getting the pipes out to those places in dire need is very expensive and very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
The places where our pipelines are close, they're usually already connected in.
Right. Makes sense. And Laura had a question on the
Yeah, that was exactly my point, that the failing wells of the treated water is typically the well. So I met with a lady, 97-year-old lady who probably was on the board with your father.
Yeah.
And, her well failed, but it's because we lined that Valley View Canal right in her backyard. And within 5 years, her well is in, but she's nowhere near a treatment facility. So it's like you said, the clusters around the treatment facility is where the potential, and usually those aren't where the failing.
Yep.
And then just a clarification on the environmental water, in the hydrology and the supply memos, we didn't ever quantify what those environmental flows were based on, what was the related water year type that was associated with those flows. And we didn't know the timing of when the diversions would be needed. And so there was a lot of information that was missing on those those environmental flows for the FERC relicensing. And so we need to keep it in context to make sure we understand what the real impact will be on environmental water requirements.
Yeah, and if you're interested, we do have the FERC negotiated, agreement that specifically spell out what those environmental flows will be and under what year conditions we will be under.
We do have that.
Oh, yeah, so it's registered.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can get you that.
Please,
Yeah.
Director Hall.
Thank you. But first, I wanted to comment on the many people who have taken time tonight to participate and the amazing analysis that was completed by so many people on this plan that took considerable time and effort, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of everyone, thanking you for that effort, and that your comments mean a lot to us, and we take them very seriously. Jim, I have a question for you. You mentioned on slide 11 that our outflows are largely estimated. And I'm wondering if that is common for water districts that you work with, or if there are some districts that have a better handle on this, and I'm just curious about that.
Yes, I think it's more a issue of the uniqueness of NID and its location. So for instance, evapotranspiration, these ag plan prescriptions were mostly written with a large Central Valley farmer in mind. There's one evapotranspiration rate. It's the same temperature all summer long. As opposed to NID that has numerous microclimates, numerous types of crops, we don't have weather stations, CIMA stations located in every microclimate throughout NID. So the estimation of that, that's made with the data that's available. I think it's 2 CIMA stations that's based on. The other element, although it's measured, a lot of the other ag districts that do these plans don't have treated water customers. And they also have an extensive flat canal system with a tailwater system. So when you're flying into Sacramento and you're flying over all those fields right there, that water district measures that's in control, those farms right there. That water district measures all the water that goes on out of the river into the canals. It measures what comes off the fields. It picks it up in the tailwater, and then it measures it again when it gets diverted to the next farmer down. So having a basically flat distribution system makes things a lot easier than what NID is faced with. So, I think in answer to your question, it's NID's uniqueness that makes it difficult to, at this point, measure everything as much as a flat valley farmer would.
Sure. I think it points out the need for us to provide the management team here at NID with more support and time to, it just, to me, the process the information we have points out the weaknesses in our systems and our process here. Because, and that's not to say that you haven't worked really hard and very diligently on this report, because it's obvious that you have. But the fact of the matter is we operate with an antiquated system of miners inches as the primary distribution system for our ag water. And I think intuitively we know that our agricultural activity here in Placer and Nevada counties is relatively small. Very important, but relatively small. And yet, the information we're presenting would imply that we have a much more robust, true agricultural community. And I think that's a real disconnect that ultimately we're going to get called on for. So part of my comments are really about the future, not about this report, because I think we kind of are where we are. We've got a deadline coming up. But one of the things that also strikes me is that in order for you to have an actionable plan, we needed to bring in the budget planning on this a long time ago. And you're really working with this kind of random number, and it says as available. So there's not really a commitment for you to be able to develop a program around this. And so I think that where we are with the plan now is one thing, but I think as a board, we have an obligation to look more futuristically at this whole issue, look at how we're evaluating our what I would call true agricultural community and our other uses of water. And I'm not sure it's our role as either a district or board members to judge how people use water. They buy it, they pay for it, so who are we to say that's a good use and that's a bad use? But I think when it comes to the state and kind of securing our water rights, knowing where that true ag is and being able to define it and quantify it and separate it from these other meaningful uses of water, but which are not true ag. And I think you need a budget that you can count on, that gives you some ability to have innovative programs, that gives us the ability to experiment, because I can't believe that we're going to be 50 years from now with miners' inches still, for heaven's sake.
I know, right?
And why can't we be the group that says, let's take a dive at doing something different, even if it's experimental, small scale, but...
Pilot project.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So, that's what I have to say.
I think we're on that, the idea to do an experimental or a pilot program on some ditch somewhere. We can decide on the scale would it be a very good thing to do.
It would.
For both, lining the canal and measuring the water.
Yeah, and if I could add to that too, I think that, I would give an example of someone who is selling a piece of property next door to my flower farm and donkey rescue, and it's 80 acres. He has bought 20 inches of summer water and 10 inches of winter water for 10, 15 years, and he's irrigated that land for 1 year. And he has a pond that, is a small pond. So I know there's a lot of people buying that don't use, and I think we have to work out the economics of it because obviously they're paying for it, so we get that benefit. But we're also considering infrastructure based on that. So anyway, lots of things to consider.
Yes.
Chris?
Director Drazen.
Yeah, I agree with you that we need a budget with all this, and also that we need to be efficient users of water. If we're only measuring our water usage by agricultural output, then, possibly I could see, you're not producing enough ag to justify having that much water. But we have to take into the fact the wildlife habitat, the fire protection, all the different things that water contributes here. And I wouldn't love to see the state come in and challenge us on that, because I don't know how they're going to prepare an EIR that would come out, hey, we're ready to dry up 200,000 acres or whatever it is, and there goes the wildlife habitat, because we got world-class wildlife habitat out here. And I can't see that happening to take it somewhere like LA.
For people.
Huh?
For people.
Yeah.
I think that's, I don't know that we have to dive into that, but I think your point is well taken, that there are other values to the environment that is created in Nevada and Placer counties, and it's spectacular here. And the district is largely responsible for that. Well, I shouldn't say it totally that way, but it's a big, really important part of it.
Right, yeah.
So, anyway, point well taken.
Yeah, no, we enable people to make that happen
Yeah.
by delivering water. And, if the state wants to go there,
So, yeah.
yeah,
These
that's
are-
another day, and but it's not gonna be received very well by a lot of people.
No,
Sure.
but it's part of the, anyway.
Can I make
think-
one quick comment?
Yes, sir.
On that? One of the interesting parts of this plan is to get a conversation such as that, and you're talking a strategic direction of the district. And right, I mean, if you look at somebody's budget, you have an idea of what their priorities are.
Yep.
And if we can take some of these 11 conservation measures that we're outlining in this, and we start putting budget to certain things, and we start doing, as you say, or a pilot of some sort, you get an idea of what the priorities of the district are.
Mm-hmm.
So, although it's a little skewed, right, and this is veering into a different conversation than what's here in front of us of the Ag Water Management Plan, it does bring up these conversations around strategy.
And don't they always, we
No,
always
they
come back
should.
around to some,
They should.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
trying to stay on topic here, and I would propose, since we have some
planning
folks
a golf
ready to
course
speak.
Can I say one quick thing?
Yeah.
In the 1991 Agricultural Water Management Plan, they had some very good ideas of what we could be doing and what we should be doing for agricultural water management conservation. We should.
Like, what's an example?
In 1990.
Well, it was canal measurement and, modernization of the meters and gates. They had options and scenarios that we could use. So we
Yeah,
should look at it.
Yeah, and I think we have, if you look back in the last plan, we mentioned some of those items, and we have implemented some of them. I think we're up to 16 automated reporting stations now that, is a huge step for us. It's all SCADA driven, which is great. But all those things cost money, and we've been under the gun to keep costs as low as possible. So
Right.
there's that fine balance in line. So anyway, I appreciate it.
Yeah. And do we have automation at the top and the bottom of the gates, is the head gate and the tail water, are they
I
talking to each other?
don't believe any of our tailwaters are fully automated, but they are recording strip chart type things, so a little bit old school, but we still get the data we need.
That's what I thought, yeah. We should start with the low hanging fruit, to start doing.
And we did. The 16 we have done are the sites where it took staff the most time to travel in and out of, trying to get as efficient as possible, so we can free their time up to do other more efficient things, but anyway, that's a story for today.
And I'm all for automation. The one thing that it doesn't do is the ditch riders can see, hey, a tree fell in, or there's a problem with this ditch. And landowner can help with that and should help. But those ditch riders they do a lot of good work.
They do. I was suggesting get rid of those. I just think this is a more accurate measurement tool to automate them.
Yeah. Well, and case in point was, he knew he had pressure here, had right at the weir, good water. 1 mile down the road, where is it? Where's the water? And if that was automated, he could then say, oh, I made this change, we're back up. But no, he had to travel 10 miles to get there and check it out, to make sure everybody was getting their proper water.
Okay. At this point, we will, entertain some public comments, some questions, conversation. I see, 2 hands raised. If you'd like to comment tonight, ask questions, whatever, this is a workshop, it's time to dialogue on this stuff. Press star 9 on your phone to raise your hand. I see we have 3 hands raised. Mr. Litton, you're first.
Thank you. And-
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I first just want to thank everyone there at NID. I'm very appreciative to all the work that everyone does there and your crucial role in our community. I just wanted to first thank also Director Hull and also Director Johansson. Really appreciated both the comments that you both just made. acknowledging, the adjustments that we really should do to modify our district. And then also too, Mr. Johansson, thank you very much for your very good point that we are really, we're stewards of this important natural environment. And that's not only in the water that we're taking out of the rivers, but it's also in the water that we're leaving in the rivers, and the rivers that we're not damming up and backing up. But I want to look at part of the draft ag management plan, and the section that shows that there are pastures, and the amount of water that's being put on there. So the plan says there are 19,727 acres of pasture, but the plan says that 66,500 acre feet are being delivered. And so what that is saying is that an average of 40 inches of water are being delivered to on average, each of those 19,727 acres of pasture. But as you all know, we don't, just like has been discussed here, there's no way to say that with any type of accuracy, because as we've discussed, NID isn't measuring the amount of raw water. And so, just like Director Hull said there, if that person buys 20 inches or 10 inches, whether or not you open them up or not, it doesn't have, there's no way for NID to know that. And so, to say that for every acre that people are purchasing, that 40 acres or 40 inches, which is more than 1 million gallons of water, is being put on every acre within the district, that's really a stretch. That's really a stretch. It's 1,086,000 gallons per acre. And so while I certainly agree that in the future, what we need to do is start measuring how much water is being delivered, I want to let you know that there are methods that we can use right now using the best available scientific data, and that is using aerial imagery. And there was a fascinating study that was done by some scientists at UC Berkeley, and they are using what's called object-based image observation. And what it does is basically just uses satellite and aerial imagery to actually measure how much of the acres are being irrigated. And what's great is that they, in their scientific research, they already did this study on Nevada County. And in doing that, they discovered that there were only about 3,000 and, let's see, what was it? 3,500 roughly acres that were being irrigated in 2014. And of course, NID is representing Nevada County as well as Placer and a little bit of Yuba. But what that data suggests is that if there's only 3,000, a little more than 3,000 acres that are being irrigated, back in 2014, it does seem that a stretch that there are 19,727 acres being irrigated with 40 inches of water per year. And so I would just ask that this number be investigated, because there is another bit of information which I'm pulling from the California Legislative Water Code, and that says that areas of uncultivated land should not be areas of uncultivated land not devoted to cultivated crops should not be construed to in any 1 year to have more than 2.5 acre feet of water. And because that pasture land definition is so vague within the customer survey, it really is just this catch-all where people might be using that for lawns, they might be using that for horses, they might be using it just to green up their property. And so I would just say that, because it does seem that California is trying to mandate that, that these numbers are observed, or at least not, extrapolated, just to put a number of 40 inches per year on all of these, 19,000 acres. I just think that using both this scientific analysis that the UC Davis, UC Berkeley scientists are able to use, and then also too using LIDAR, which is another method using satellite observation to be able to really measure how much is being utilized. And just one fun factoid, one of those scientists, the lead scientist at that UC Berkeley study, he was actually a cattle rancher here in Nevada County. And so I just thought it was, how perfect, that this person has so much experience and would be a great asset for the district to be able to bring into that and to be able to do more proper analysis, because as we all know, the customer survey is just simply inaccurate. So I just want to thank you all very much for your time, and I appreciate your passion for updating the district and using the best available scientific data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Linton. Nicole, you're next.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ms. Hull, thank you for your leadership and representation on the board. I am not an NID user, but I do have a question about the latent water demand. If we could just circle back to that real quick. Can you tell me, and I think it was mentioned a little bit earlier regarding if there's lack of infrastructure at a parcel with a dry well, are you including in your calculation people who are within the next several decades unlikely to be NID users due to that lack of infrastructure if their well does happen to go dry?
Who would like to address that?
I'm not sure what calculation she's referring to in terms of whether we include those or not. This goes back to the discussion we had before, which is that soft service area, right? So we understand that there's areas of our district that will never, ever, very unlikely receive water anytime soon. But you start to look at where our infrastructure is and how close they are, and does it make sense for them to be able to extend a pipeline a mile to be able to serve several folks versus 10 miles to serve one, right? That's part of what we look at when we look at that soft service area as we develop our demand as we're moving forward and all that part of that plan for water. That's what we look at, is the soft service area. Areas that make sense. And is that maybe the question?
I heard, and Nicole, you can correct me. I heard you ask, have we drawn those boundaries where those to exclude those areas that will never be served? Was that part of your question?
Yes, or not never to be served, but at least within the next probably couple decades at least, if there's lack of infrastructure. I'm just wondering if those types of people who have private wells, if they're being included in your calculation for latent demand.
Yeah, that's a great question, and not in this particular document, I think is the best way to say that. But moving forward into our urban and our plan for water process is definitely something we will be looking into. But I know both of those documents have developed a soft service area. Basically, that is a review of the, I think as Doug just mentioned, it's a review of the area where the feasibility to serve those next to our infrastructure are included, but those that are too far outside and we know it's way cost prohibitive, we do not count those.
Okay.
Infrastructure, correct?
Yes, thank you, treated water. When we get to the plan for water or raw water master plan, it does that same analysis for raw water canals as well.
And we did that as part of those TMs, right? We looked at the soft service areas for the demand information.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to answer my question. Thank you.
Nicole, could you give us your last name, please?
Johnson.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for participating. Next, Heidi, without a last name. If you could give us your last name also?
Sure, it's Heidi Hansen.
Heidi Hansen, go ahead.
Hi, first, thank you for doing this on Zoom. I really appreciate it. It's nice because I live down in Placer County, and so it's quite a ways to go up to one of your meetings. Also, just wanted to take this opportunity because I used to serve on Placer County Farm Bureau's board, and so I've had the NID folks come to those meetings often and listen to all you guys. So one of the things that I know that's very unpopular with many of my fellow ag folks is the thought that you guys might start metering the ag water. But I wanted to raise one little hand and say I would welcome that, only because I live where it's hilly. And so I have to use an electric pump to pump my NID water. And so I only irrigate in the season from April to October. about 14 hours a day. So my example is that I know I'm subsidizing my other ag users about 10 hours a day worth of money. So I just wanted you guys, because I know you're talking strategy and what you're going to do long term. So there are people that would probably welcome metering. And I know it's expensive and, you know, probably out there, but I've heard it in past NID discussions about that happening someday. So, and so that's the other thing with the conversation earlier with the gentleman talking about you guys overestimating what's going on water on pastures. I would be one of those people because I don't water 24/7. So you're estimating too high for me anyway. And I'm only 6 inches, still 6 inches of water every year. So thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Next, is it Roger Ingram? Roger, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I had, good to see you, Chris and Rich and everybody else on the board. Just to give a little more input on the miners inches on irrigated pastures. So I run sheep with another guy. We buy 8 miners inches to irrigate about 12 acres of irrigated pasture. So again, just to kind of reiterate that usually people, if they're buying on a miner's inch basis, might be irrigating 1.3 to 2 acres of irrigated pasture with that miner's inch. The other thing I wanted to see, the 5 years on the previous ag water management plan showed a relatively static environmental demand of like 10,700. Is that projected to go up over the next 5 years? Does anybody know?
Yeah, great question. It really all depends upon when our FERC license comes into play. That will kick in a bunch of different environmental flows that the district will be subject to. So it's a moving target as we speak.
So when does, is the FERC licensing still a long ways away or a short ways away or what?
Who wants to answer that question?
Hard to tell, Mr. Ingram.
We all laugh. It's unknown at this time.
Okay, and then I guess the third thing I wanted to point out is, and I also come from this as a background as a University of California Cooperative Extension Livestock and Natural Resources Advisor for 31 years here in Nevada and Placer counties. Just the climate change stuff and if the FERC stuff is going to result in more environmental water going for more increased water going for environmental uses. I think as I recall from many of Chip's presentations that in a normal year, we're kind of still depositing water in the reservoirs till maybe around 1st of July or something like that, and then drawing down from there. And I guess if climate change came about and the norm became more like June 1st or June 15th, or earlier than that, that there'd be no more inflows into the reservoirs, I guess, what would be the impact on agriculture then? So I'm just throwing that out as a future thing, maybe to go a little bit more in depth on the drought stuff. And then did I hear Rich Johansson correctly when he was asking the question that irrigated pasture is not considered an irrigated crop?
Not considered a perennial crop.
So is there a reason why that is so?
It's not, if I could clarify that a little bit, it's not considered as one of the highest uses of the water during a drought. Our drought contingency plan spells out what the priority for water usage is, and we can get into that in the discussion if you'd like, but basically it's health and human and livestock and so on and so forth. And we have set aside in our drought contingency plan the minimum amount we need to satisfy those customers for the next year. And that's how we determine how much water we have for the current year. It's all based on how much we can carry over into the next year for bare minimum for public health and safety needs.
I understand you got the priorities, and I've seen those priorities before. and all those types of things. All I'm just trying to say is irrigated pasture predominantly is going to be made up of perennial grass. And so I guess as discussions move forward, to at least keep that in mind. I can understand certain crops are going to not need as much water, but it will have a high priority. But just to always keep that irrigated pasture, at least in consideration, is what I would urge.
Gotcha. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank
Is that
you.
it?
Yes, that's it.
Thanks for calling. Next, we have a phone number, 81618. I can't read the numbers.
Right. 577.
9577. If you could give your name, first and last name, please, and go ahead. Star six to unmute. You have your hand raised to talk. Phone number ending in 9577. Okay, we'll move on. Come back to you if you're still there. Next is a Fowler. Can we have a first name, Mr. Fowler? Go ahead.
Hey, this could have been, this is Brad Fowler. Good evening.
Hi.
Thank you,
Go
board
ahead.
and staff. And my dang old connection quit me. Son of a gun.
You're cutting out. Oh, now you're clear gone. Need to go stand on the roof of the house, Brad. Okay, anybody else like to comment or? Yes, I'll try the hand that's raised on phone ending in 9577. Are you there? Oh, star six to unmute yourself. Okay, last chance. Okay, is there anybody else that would like to comment tonight? If you'd like to, here we go. Brad, are you there?
I'm going to try it again. I apologize. We live out here in the wilderness. This is Brad Fowler. I just wanted to thank you all for allowing, or for your consideration of agriculture. And Director Hull, you said it pretty accurately. We don't have a lot of agriculture, but the agriculture that we do have is important. And I appreciate that this agency values agriculture. And I think this board respects agriculture. And I just wanted to thank you all for that, and thank you for the opportunity to have input and recognize that this water is our livelihood. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, Brad. Anybody else like to comment? Join the discussion about ag water management plan. Laura or Dave Barhyde, go ahead.
Hi, this is Laura. I'm sorry, I have to make a comment. I'm just appalled to find out that irrigated pasture is not as important as a golf course or a park. I'm sorry, it is perennial and it's a huge expense for the owner to redevelop that if it is not maintained. So I just want to put that out there. It really ought to be considered an irrigated crop. That's all.
Laura,
But thank you again. I wanted to also say thank you for having this tonight and letting us have a chance to speak. Thank you.
You're welcome, Laura. Thank you for calling. But to clarify, that was noted earlier, that determination is a state determination, not ours, just so that we're clear who's watering golf courses.
Well,
But it doesn't mean we shouldn't address it some way, shape, or form.
sure, it was in our policy prior to the state making the same declaration, but we mirror what the state required of us, so.
Chip, do we have discretion over that?
Sure. It's all part of the water shortage contingency plan.
Well, that's where I'm headed, is so we could,
We could say our pasture farmers are
our
very.
pasture farmers are more important than golf courses, which I would sort of be in that camp, okay? But I'm asking, do we have discretion from this, or are regulators gonna hammer us for that?
Well, I'll just speak to the last drought, because that's all I really have as a
Okay.
reference. And they left parks and golf courses 100%. No mandatory reductions whatsoever.
Really?
Yeah, he mentioned that, I think.
No, I knew that, but I still just, every time I hear it, I'm shocked.
Right, I have too.
So could we add, I guess you can't say, could we add at our discretion, irrigated pasture?
Supersedes golf courses
So,
in the drought
I think
management plan.
as a water agency, we have the authority or the ability to make our own water shortage contingency plan.
Mhm.
But you start going down a slippery slope when you start picking who's going to survive a drought and who's not. And I know ag is very important to this district, and
Yes,
rightfully
it is.
so. It's why we were formed.
Well, it's
But you're going to get the other side of it, of the community that says, why are you going to let Gateway Park turn brown? I can no longer golf, and you just put an entire golf community out of business. Those are really tough questions, but definitely something that we can discuss and make part of an update to a drought.
I guess where I'm headed with that is, I think it's a worthy discussion for this board to have about, in the event of that level of drought, whether or not we can switch those categories of businesses or agricultural water use to preserve more readily the ranch uses, the pasture uses over the golf courses. And I just think it's a worthy discussion to have, find out the economic impact, find out, are we talking about 5 or are we talking about 30? I don't really know.
Yeah,
It seems like it's worthy for us, as everyone thinks we are headed into some sort of drought, it's worthy to look at.
Sure.
Yep, I agree.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, and it might be that they're not mutually exclusive either.
That might be.
That we just
That we
add them.
can
They're
curtail
added.
golf courses to some levels and still be able to provide
Yes,
water for our irrigated pasture.
yes.
Director Johnson.
Tongue in cheek, but, if I had irrigated pasture, I'd just put a green down at the far end and have a 20-acre, 50-acre, 100-acre fairway with a par 20. I don't care, But it gets to what is the criteria? What defines a golf course? And is it private? Is it public? Does it have to be played every day? Is there that definition in the state definition? And if there isn't, we may have some leeway.
Sure.
Right.
That's great. Great
That's
point.
why I think it's worthy of a greater, deeper dive for this board to look at.
Yeah. So I appreciate all the comments. The one thing that worries me is that if we escalate our current number of 78,000 acre feet, which is our bottom line, if we do anything that increases that number, essentially all we're doing is making droughts occur more often. So we have to be careful, but that is, again, why we need to have that discussion. Go over all the numbers and all the categories and
Yeah, I think
really
it's
hammer it.
worthy for us to revisit.
And as I mentioned, there is a version of a drought contingency plan or a water shortage supply plan in this version of this document. And again, it's just our first crack at mirroring the state's regulatory levels. And it's not a drastic change from what the plan currently is. But we will have another crack at it in the urban plan, and then even beyond that, we can modify that document whenever we need to. Okay?
Since we do have to adopt our water shortage contingency plan independent, we should have an independent meeting of it.
I agree.
With both the ag and the urban, let's talk about that only.
I'm with you. I kind of foresee, and hopefully you all agree, but that we will get through the process here for the ag plan and maybe the urban plan as well, but then we'll pull that document out and then revisit it right away and dive into it.
Well, it may be prudent, it may be.
Maybe forced upon us
Maybe
anyway.
forced upon us.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If these little rainstorms don't develop any better. Mr. Litton, I see you have your hand raised again, or is it still raised, or been raised, or did you want to speak again?
You know, just very briefly, I just wanted to, say thank you very much for pointing this out, that that the pasture category, that it does seem very important. And I do think there are many important uses within that. I do want to point out, though, that the irrigated pasture category is separate than the hay category and alfalfa category. So both of those which are being used for animals, those are separate from the irrigated pasture category. But I do think that this does highlight a really important fact, which is simply that the term pasture is used far too broadly within the survey. And I think that it would really empower the district to specify that and to really break that down, because I would certainly agree with our other callers who said that they have commercial commercial agriculture or commercial ranching that's taking place on those pastures. But I certainly don't think that all of the other people who are marking pasture, the broad majority of the community who's marking that down, they're not farming or ranching animals. That is the category that you're going to select if you want your lawn to be green, or if you want to keep it green around your house. And so, and especially then, what that'll do is it'll give you the power to be able to say, well, we want to limit non-commercial lawns and things. And really, to me, that sounds much more like recreation, because if you're irrigating a place for purpose, then that's agriculture. But if you're irrigating your lawn, that's pleasure. And to me, that's more like recreation. So I think that, splitting this up and doing the survey differently, I think that it'll give you a handle on where the water is really being used. And I think a lot of that can also, in the meantime, even within the, short, next 3 or 6 months, that can easily be analyzed using that satellite data. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for bringing this up. And I think that it's a very easy change to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe for pasture, I think in Placer County, there's a lot of horse pasture. People have properties and they raise horses, and so they irrigate pasture for horses. So I don't know if that's for some of them perhaps for commercial and others for pleasure. I think
And
horse pasture is also true.
then in agriculture, do we call that an agricultural crop or not, right?
An agricultural what?
Crop. No, agriculture pursuit, horses.
Horses?
Yeah.
They're a crop.
They're not,
It's not food or fiber, right?
not with,
You're not advocating for a slaughterhouse, right?
no. I'm just being devil's advocate for the point of discussion right here, right? Because there's a lot of
So,
nuances in all this
Nevada
stuff.
County, so up until few years ago, if you had race horses, commercial ag.
Right.
If you had hobby horses, not.
Yeah.
That definition was changed in livestock.
Well, there's a lot of cattle also in Placer County, and they need the horses to round up the cows. And,
Absolutely.
They use them in working farms as well.
Yeah. So, as I had to herd a cattle on my Kubota the other day, the horse is the only way to do it.
Heard a cat?
Cattle,
Oh, cattle. I heard cat.
with a
Okay.
Kubota
Yeah.
tractor.
Okay, does anybody,
That's slow.
does anybody else like to speak tonight? Star 9, your phone.
Roger's up again.
Roger Ingram.
Roger Ingram's up again. Okay, go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, and just on the discussion that's been taking place, just the California Department of Food and Agriculture does have a definition of ag for food and fiber, which would not include horses. I know that there was a couple that did have racehorses in the area, especially like when I first started, and I think that's why that definition was broadened. But again, I think as you have some meetings about defining this a little bit more, maybe there would be some sort of weighting of criteria to determine if you were going to do something with irrigated pasture as a perennial crop, as far as who would get that priority, if there was going to be any priority. And also just as the 78,000 acre feet, that is the minimum that is needed. Sure want to encourage you to keep doing that. I wasn't around at the time, but drought in the 70s, I think after the first year of the drought, they didn't necessarily have a minimum, or it wasn't much. And so there was a real shortage the next year. So maintaining that critical minimum is absolutely necessary to ensure that there's going to be water for the next year. So thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for all you've done in getting ready for the meeting and presenting this for everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Roger. Okay. Anybody else out there? Star 9 your phone if you'd like to participate tonight. All right. I don't see anybody. Last chance. All right. Any board members, any final comments? Staff, final comments?
You'll have another chance to comment.
Oh, yes.
Wednesday,
Wednesday.
24th.
So Wednesday the 24th will be the public hearing
Correct.
for this document.
Public workshop also?
No, it's an actual public hearing, which is the requirement under the Ag Water Management Plan is to have the public hearing.
Gotcha.
Oh, you have a comment? Okay. Director Heck, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody who has attended, who's taken your time, for the people that submitted written comments. I've read every one of them. So most of them, if not all of them, are excellent and really reflect your time and your heart for this subject. And we really appreciate it. So thank you all very much, and we're going to continue on and make this better.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Director Holmes.
I just wanted to thank the staff who've been working hard on this too, because this is a lot of work. And I really appreciate the way that you, I feel, maintain a very open mind to the feedback and actively work to incorporate ideas. And you have a lot of it coming at you all at once. So I know it's not an easy process on your end.
Right.
And I really appreciate it. And I'm glad to be part of it. So thank you.
Yeah, you're very professional.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. You always are. Thank you.
Word, Laura?
I did everything. Thank you all very much, staff as well as the public for tremendous comments and efforts put in.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, public, for watching and participating tonight. We will see you on the 24th, public hearing, if you so wish. The meeting's adjourned.